Have you ever found something so strange that it made you question everything you thought you knew? Well, gather around, my friends, because I want to tell you a story that will send chills down your spine. It's a tale about a book that holds secrets, a book that knows the future, and a book that might just control your fate. So, get cozy, turn off the lights, and listen closely. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. You won't want to miss what happens next, and trust me, you'll want to share your thoughts after hearing this. I had always dreamed of being a writer. The idea of crafting stories, weaving words together, and sharing my imagination with the world thrilled me. One rainy afternoon, I wandered into an old antique store. The air was thick with dust and the scent of forgotten memories. As I browsed through the clutter, something caught my eye, a blank journal, its leather cover cracked and worn. It felt special, like it held stories waiting to be told. I bought it, excited to fill its pages with my thoughts and dreams. That night, I sat at my desk, the journal open before me. I stared at the empty pages, my pen poised, but no words came. Frustrated, I decided to leave it for the night. As I turned off the light, I noticed a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. I shook my head, dismissing it as a trick of the light. I climbed into bed, the journal resting on my nightstand, and drifted off to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, the sun streamed through my window. I rubbed my eyes and glanced at the journal. My heart raced as I saw words scrawled across the first page, written in my own handwriting. Today, I will meet someone who will change my life. I was startled. Had I written this in my sleep? I couldn't remember. Curiosity piqued. I went about my day. As I stepped outside, I bumped into a stranger, a woman with striking green eyes. We struck up a conversation, and she shared fascinating stories about her travels. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the person the journal had predicted. It was thrilling, and I felt a rush of excitement. That night, I opened the journal again, eager to see what else it had in store for me. The next entry read, "Tomorrow, you will find something that will frighten you." My heart sank. What could it mean? I tried to brush it off, but a sense of dread settled in my stomach. The next day, I went for a walk in the park. As I strolled along the path, I noticed an old wooden box half buried in the leaves. I pulled it out and opened it, revealing a collection of old photographs and letters. But one photo caught my eye, a picture of a man who looked just like me, standing in front of my house, but it was taken years ago. I felt a chill run down my spine. How could this be? I quickly closed the box and hurried home, my heart racing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the events of the day in my mind. I opened the journal again, and the next entry read, "You should have left the box alone." A wave of panic washed over me. Who was writing this? How did it know what I had done? I felt like I was being watched, like something sinister was lurking just out of sight. The following night, I decided to confront the journal. I wrote, "Who are you?" After a moment, the pen moved on its own, spelling out, "I am your future." My hands trembled as I read the words. This was no ordinary journal. It was a curse, a dark entity that was controlling my life. I tried to ignore it, but the entries kept coming. Each night, I would wake to new predictions, and each one grew darker. "You will lose something precious," it warned one night. The next day, I lost my job. "Someone you trust will betray you," it said another night. My best friend stopped talking to me without explanation. I felt trapped in a nightmare, my life unraveling thread by thread. Desperate to escape the journal's grip, I tried to burn it, but the flames flickered and died as if the book was protecting itself. I felt hopeless. The journal had become my master, and I was its puppet. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront the source of its power. That night, I wrote a bold entry. "I will break free from you." The pen moved again, writing back, "You cannot escape what you were meant to become." Fear twisted in my stomach. What did it mean? I had to know. I spent the night researching curses and haunted objects, hoping to find a way to rid myself of the journal. I discovered that some cursed items could be destroyed by confronting the spirit within them. I realized I had to face whatever was controlling the book. The next night, I gathered my courage. I lit candles around my room and placed the journal in the center. I closed my eyes and called out, "Show yourself." The air grew cold, and I felt a presence in the room. I opened my eyes and saw a shadowy figure hovering above the journal. It was a dark silhouette, its features obscured. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. The figure seemed to laugh, a chilling sound that echoed in the silence. "You invited me in when you opened the book. You wanted to be a writer, and now you will write your own doom." Panic surged through me. I realized that I had been so eager to create stories that I had unwittingly invited this darkness into my life. "I won't let you control me," I shouted. The figure's laughter grew louder, filling the room with an unsettling energy. Suddenly, the journal began to shake, pages flipping wildly. I grabbed it, determined to wrestle it from its grip. The entries blurred before my eyes, words twisting into chaotic patterns. I felt a surge of strength and shouted, "I reject you." In that moment, the figure shrieked, and the journal fell silent. I felt the weight of its presence lift, and the room warmed again. I opened my eyes to find the journal still, the pages blank once more. I had done it. I had broken the curse. But as I breathed a sigh of relief, a new entry appeared on the first page. "You may have escaped me, but I will always be watching." My heart sank. The battle was far from over. I realized that the journal had not just been a cursed object. It was a reminder of the darkness that lurked within me, waiting for the right moment to strike again. I closed the journal and locked it away, but I knew I could never truly escape its influence. I had learned a terrifying lesson. Sometimes, the scariest stories are the ones we write ourselves. And as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were still watching, waiting for their chance to return. As the night deepened, an unnerving silence settled around me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was still lurking in the shadows. Even though I had locked the journal away, I was acutely aware that I could no longer ignore what it had revealed about me. That fear, that anxiety, tended to creep into my mind at the oddest moments, whispering shivers of dread that no amount of logic could silence. The following day, I decided to visit the antique store again, hoping to learn more about the journal's past. Maybe someone there could tell me how to rid myself of this curse completely. As I entered, the store felt more oppressive than I remembered. The shelves sagged under the weight of dusty trinkets, and a strange chill hung in the air, making the hairs on my arms stand up. The owner, an elderly man with deep-set eyes, greeted me with a knowing look, as if he sensed the turmoil swirling within me. "What are you looking for?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. I hesitated before responding. "I want to know about the journal I bought last week." He frowned, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the counter. "That journal is not just a book, it's a vessel for dark forces. You need to be careful what you wish for." His words sent a chill down my spine. I needed answers, but wasn't sure I wanted to hear what he had to say. Was there something about the journal that I didn't know? "Tell me more," I urged, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "It chooses its victims carefully. It feeds on your desires, then twists them into nightmares. The more you ignore it, the stronger it will grow." As his words sinking in, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A shadow flitted just beyond the rows of dusty merchandise, but when I turned to look, nothing was there. My breath quickened, and a cold sweat trickled down my back. I nodded, finally feeling how this experience clawed at my mind. After leaving the store, I walked home with unease hanging over me like a heavy fog. The streets were empty, the late afternoon sun casting eerie shapes as it lowered toward the horizon. With each step, I felt the uneasiness seep deeper into my bones. Something sensed my fear, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every passing car, every whisper of the wind seemed to carry the journal's dark energy. Later that night, I plucked up the courage to open the journal again. The words hastily scrawled in my handwriting taunted me. "You can't escape what you were meant to become." I slammed it shut, but not before a new entry appeared. "Things are about to get interesting." My heart pounded furiously. and I felt as if my very soul was being pulled into its depths. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through my house, sounding like something heavy had fallen in the other room. I jumped to my feet, the journal forgotten, and raced toward the source of the noise. As I entered the living room, I froze in shock. The box I had discovered in the park, the one I thought I had hidden away, lay open on the floor, photos scattered around like fallen leaves. The picture of the man who looked like me was now upside down, as if mocking me. Panicking, I flipped it over, only to see a reflection in the glass frame. A figure was behind me, a dark shape silhouetted against the wall. I whipped around, heart racing, but there was nothing, just empty space. And yet I could feel a suffocating presence, a heavy darkness pressing down on me. A cold wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candles I had lit. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and contorting as if alive. With trembling hands, I tried to reassemble the photographs, but they seemed to shimmer in a way that obscured my vision. I blinked hard, and when I opened my eyes, the images had changed. Now there were blurry faces peering back at me, twisted expressions of fear and longing. My own face flickered among them, screaming silently, trapped within those nightmare frames. I staggered back, a scream lodged in my throat. I couldn't tear my gaze away, and it felt as if the photographs were pulling me in, trying to swallow me whole. I was barely aware of the sound of rustling behind me until I felt hot breath on my neck. I spun around, and there it was, the dark figure, more defined now, with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. It reached for me, fingers elongated and claw-like. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor, as if the shadows were holding me in place. "Do you see?" It hissed, voice low and slithering. "This is your fate. You will write your own end." Just as I thought I would collapse under the weight of my fear, the power of fight or flight surged through me. I broke free from the paralysis and bolted for the front door. I flung it open and sprinted outside, the night air biting in my skin but providing a feeling of clarity. I had to escape the house, the journal, and the curse that had turned my life into this terrifying spiral. I ran through the streets, unaware of where my feet were taking me. My heart raced, and each breath felt like fire in my lungs. I was caught in a frantic daze, the words from the journal echoing in my mind. "You can't escape what you are meant to become." Finally, I stumbled upon a secluded clearing in the park, a place where I had often sought solace before all of this began. The moonlight spilled across the grass, illuminating the surrounding trees. I fell to my knees, gasping for breath, my mind racing with thoughts about how to break free from its grip. But as I sat there, I noticed something. The soft rustle of leaves turned into whispers. The shadows among the trees began to move. I looked closer and saw that they weren't just shadows. They were figures, eyes glinting in the darkness, watching me. Panic surged again, and I scrambled to my feet, but I was surrounded now. They drew closer, their forms becoming more solid as they emerged from the darkness. They resembled the faces from the photographs, twisted in agony and despair. I could hear their whispers rising around me, an eerie chorus of warnings and regrets. "You must pay the price," one voice echoed, sinister and chilling. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, backing up against a tree trunk, feeling nothing but the cold bark digging into my back. "Your stories," they replied in unison. "You will write our tales, heed our calls, or you shall become one with us." Their voices spiraled around me, and I felt trapped in their suffocating darkness. I tried to plead with them, to explain that I never wanted any of this, that all I wanted was to tell a few simple stories. But it was too late. My fear and despair fed the shadows, giving them strength. I could feel my grip on reality slipping. Around me, the park transformed into a nightmare world. The trees twisted grotesquely, their bark contorted into gnarled faces that screamed silently, and the ground beneath me felt like it was shifting, threatening to swallow me whole. I couldn't breathe. I had tried so hard to escape, But now I was surrounded by the very nightmares I had sought to evade. Then the journal appeared in my hands, seemingly materializing from thin air. It felt hot against my skin, pulsing with a sinister energy. I opened it frantically, desperate for answers, but the pages were blank again. I realized that the only way to break this horrifying cycle was to confront the darkness, to understand the past etched into every page. With a determination fueled by fear, I began writing, not stories of fantasy and desire, but my own truth, my fears, regrets, and the very existence of the curse itself. The dark figures watched closely, their expressions shifting and contorting with each word I poured onto the page. As I wrote, the shadows began to quiver, reacting to my words. The air crackled with energy, sparking like electricity overhead. Were they weakening? I felt a surge of hope, but then came a bone-chilling warning. We will not let you go easily. The ground trembled, and the darkness tightened its grip, feeling stronger than before. I had to finish this before I lost myself completely. The journal absorbed my fear as it became more alive in my hands. I wiped the sweat from my brow and pushed on, transcribing my most haunting memories. I realized I was writing not just to appease the shadows, but to reclaim my own story. I poured every ounce of my fear, anger, and regret into those pages. The words flowed out of me like a torrent, and with each sentence, I felt the night growing lighter, the shadows retreating. I felt strength returning to me, a realization that I could create my own fate. I am the author of my life. I wrote fiercely, the pen scratching madly across the page. Suddenly, as if responding to my resolve, the figures began to fade, their shapes dissipating into the night air. I could hear their anguished cries as they dwindled away, satisfied by my acknowledgement of their existence, but powerless to stop me. With one final stroke, I finished my entry and slammed the journal shut. I took a deep breath, the night air filling my lungs. I felt liberated, free of the weight that had been pressing down on me for weeks. I looked around, seeing the clearing in a different light. A place no longer filled with terror, but with a sense of victory. But just as the relief washed over me, I remembered the owner of the antique store, the warning he gave me ringing in my ears. I had interfered with forces I didn't fully understand. What if this wasn't truly over? As I prepared to leave the park, I couldn't shake the feeling that something remained, waiting, lurking, eager to reclaim what had been momentarily lost. I took a cautious step back into the shadows, glancing over my shoulder as I made my way home. The journey back felt longer than before, every rustle and gust of wind sending shivers down my spine. I couldn't let my guard down. The night had a way of holding on to its secrets. When I reached my house, a chill settled over me. It felt different, disturbingly quiet. I stepped inside, heart pounding, half expecting to find the journal waiting for me on the table. I scanned the room, but everything was still. I closed and locked the door, taking a breath of relief. But then I heard it, a soft scratch, almost like a whisper, coming from the desk where I had left the journal. I approached slowly, each heartbeat echoing loudly in my chest. The journal lay closed, but the air around it felt charged. I could sense a presence, an energy that thrummed beneath the surface. I was both terrified and compelled to look. As I reached for it, I felt a force pulling me back. The moment my fingers grazed the cover, the room plunged into darkness. The lights flickered, casting terrifying shadows that danced around me. The journal opened spontaneously, pages flipping wildly, words forming letters in a dark, swirling ink that bled into the air. My eyes widened as I read the new entry that had appeared. You thought you could escape, but your story is only beginning. My heart raced as terrifying possibilities raced through my mind. What had I unleashed? I scrambled backward, pushing against the wall. The room shook, the shadows growing denser, now reaching for me. Laughter echoed from everywhere, a cacophony of voices blending into one sinister sound, swirling around me like a tempest. It became clear I hadn't just fought against a dark force, I had awakened it. It was more than just a curse. It was a living thing, thriving on my fear and despair. I was no longer the author of my own story. I was merely a character in a dark tale written by the shadows. The journal continued to flip, new entries formulating faster than I could comprehend. Each one predicted my downfall, revealing ever more terrifying scenarios that awaited me if I didn't play by its rules. Every word you write will bind you deeper, it taunted. And now you will witness just how twisted your fate can become. I felt my resolve begin to crumble as darkness loomed larger around me. All those thoughts of victory faded. I was aware now that I had become ensnared in a web from which there might be no escape. The shadows whispered louder, promising untold horrors. Feeling utterly trapped, the only light in the room flickered vibrantly. A candle I hadn't noticed before sat on the desk, an ember flickering weakly amidst the growing darkness. Suddenly, an idea sparked in my mind. Could it be the source of my salvation? Summoning every ounce of courage I had left, I lunged for the candle and ignited it with a quick strike against the wall. The flame danced defiantly in the air as my surroundings darkened even further, shadows stretching grotesquely across the walls. Your light will only draw them closer. The shadows twisted and curled around me, reaching for the flickering flame like hungry creatures. I felt a surge of panic. The darkness seemed to writhe and pulse, reacting to my defiance. My heart raced as I held the candle higher, its glow dancing against the oppressive blackness enveloping the room. I took a cautious step back, keeping the light steady, but the shadows didn't retreat. Instead, they seemed to multiply, filling the air with a thick, suffocating cold. I noticed that the whispers had grown into a low drone, a chorus of voices merging into one overwhelming sound that crept under my skin. They promised what I had always feared, that my worst nightmares would come to pass. You think you can resist? The voice echoed all around me, slick and serpentine. You're merely delaying the inevitable. You belong to us. Frantically, I searched for a way out, a hint of escape, but the room felt smaller, the walls closing in like a vice. I glanced back at the journal, now open on the desk, its blank pages starting to fill with dark ink. The words twisted and turned, forming images that clawed at my mind. Nightmarish landscapes and grotesque figures danced across the pages. I couldn't look away. It was like watching a horror movie unfold, yet I was part of it. I moved toward the window, desperate to escape the crippling atmosphere. The outside world beckoned with the promise of freedom, but when I reached the glass, I stopped cold. The reflection staring back at me was not my own, but a fragment of the darkness. My eyes sunk and hollow, about to become an empty vessel filled with despair. Every instinct screamed at me to run, yet my body felt rooted to the spot. I could hear the figures beyond the pane, laughing softly, their silhouettes just out of view. I turned my head sharply, fearing what might be lurking behind me. Suddenly, the temperature dropped again, and I could see my breath as wisps of fog in front of me. Another shadow emerged from the corner of the room, a figure with eyes like burning coals locking onto mine. You can't escape the truth, it hissed, its voice a low rumble that vibrated through my chest. You invited us in? No, I didn't, I shouted, gripping the candle tighter as if it could shield me from the impending dread. But inside, I felt the weight of my own guilt. I had chased the unknown, sought out a story that should have remained buried. The journal had merely been a vessel for everything I had wished away. With dread pooling in my stomach, I turned back towards the desk, the journal beckoning me closer despite the fear coursing through my veins. The words now filled the pages, dark and ominous, as if they were weaving a narrative exclusively about me. I grasped the candle and leaned closer, desperate to catch a glimpse of what it foretold. I read aloud, my voice trembling. You will lose everything you love. Each word reverberated in my mind, pulling at the threads of my oldest fears. Images flooded me, faces of loved ones fading into shadows, my home crumbling to dust, friends turning away in horror. I gasped, realizing the terrible truth nestled within the words. This was a prophecy, and I was the author of my own demise. I staggered back, the candle flickering violently in my hand. The shadows surged forward, alive with hunger, drawn irresistibly to the sound of my voice. They whispered my name, a chilling sound repeated like an echo in a cavern, weaving into my consciousness until it was all I could hear. You belong here. Terror clawed at my throat as I shouted, "No, I won't let you take me." I pushed the candle further outward, as if it could create a barrier. The flame blazed brightly, but also beckoned to shadows like moths to a flame, drawing them closer. Shadows stretched out as if searching for something solid to grasp, and the darkness grew denser until it crowded the room. I stumbled to the side, trying to find a safe space, but every direction I turned felt filled with unseen dangers. The figures in the darkness began to form into grotesque shapes, remnants of the people they were meant to be, twisted and hollow-eyed. I recognized them, loved ones, friends, and even my own face among them. They reached out, silent screams caught in their throats. In a final act of desperation, my finger traced over the journal's pages where they writhed in darkness. I had unknowingly followed their whims, surrendering my soul to the whims of whatever hunted me. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice quavering as I fought through the haze of fear. Tension built around me as the shadows paused momentarily, as if considering my plea. And then the voice returned, now more insistent, more decadent in its menace. "We require your memories, the stories you hold, the fears you keep hidden. You must allow us to consume them." My heart raced and instinct kicked in. I began to write furiously in the journal, desperate to reclaim control. I poured every memory onto the paper, from the most trivial moments to the most intimate thoughts, racing against the consuming darkness while I documented each precious experience. It felt like I was pulling light from within myself, a beacon in the suffocating night. The shadows writhed visibly, recoiling from the words that spilled from my pen. Each stroke seemed to sap their strength, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. But they were cunning. I could feel their frustration mounting. They lashed out with vengeful fury. The room shook violently, knocking the journal from my hands. The candle flickered and dimmed, leaving me in a near-complete blackness. Just a smothering silence filled with a low, menacing growl. I grasped for the journal, but the shadows seized my wrists, pulling me back with surprising force. "You cannot rewrite what is meant to be." The combined voices screamed, echoing off the walls, a cacophony of rage and despair. Desperation surged within me. I wrestled with my fears, and as I fought, I could feel the journal slip from my grasp, falling to the floor and opening with a violent thud. I turned to flee, but the shadows coalesced, their tendrils gripping me tightly. They wrapped around my limbs, squeezing until I could hardly breathe. Their whispers grew frantic, drowning me in their hunger. "Join us," they chanted, pulling tighter and drawing closer. I could feel their cold breath against my skin, chills dotting my arms as they dug deep into my fear. Just as I felt the last flicker of hope extinguish, I recalled the power of my own stories, the light I had harbored deep within. Summoning every ounce of strength, I focused on my most cherished memories, moments of love, laughter, and connection. I visualized them, igniting a fire of purpose inside me. With a swell of determination, I shouted, "I am more than your vessel. I am the writer of my fate." The shadows writhed in surprise, their grip weakening. I could feel their attentions diverting as my light grew stronger. That flame within me reached for the darkness, pushing it back in violent waves, each memory sparking against the shadows like fireworks against the night sky. With every thought I embraced, I wrote it down in the air, sealing it with a breath. "I will not become your prey." In a final act of defiance, I took a step forward, diving into the torrent of darkness around me. I felt the cold tendrils slip away, and the growing warmth of my memories ignited in the face of despair. Light erupted from my mind, filling the space with brilliant luminosity. "You cannot take me," I cried, standing my ground as the shadows recoiled in terror. With one last surge, the shadows writhed and shrieked, swirling against the brightness. Slowly, the air cleared, revealing the room once more, vibrant and filled with color. The presence of the figures faded, the whispers dying down to faint echoes. I stood, breathless and shaken. The journal lay open on the floor, blank once more, offering a tempting reprieve, tainted by the remnants of the darkness that lingered. But even as I began to feel a sense of victory, a trepidation settled in. What if this was only a brief respite? A test of my resolve? What if the shadows were simply regrouping, preparing for another attack? The reflection of my face in the journal's empty pages stared back at me, still haunted, still aware of what had happened. I realized then that I had not completely vanquished them. They were still close by, lurking in the unseen corners of my life, waiting for an opportunity to slip back in, to reclaim their hold. And as dread gripped my heart again, I knew the fight was far from over. Soon darkness would come calling again, and I would have to confront it, not simply as an adversary, but as an integral part of my story, a reflection of the fears I could no longer ignore. I took a deep breath, vowing to prepare myself for the next battle. This was only the beginning. In the depths of the night, I steeled myself to be the author of my own tale, ready to face whatever gripping horror awaited me in the shadows. In the depths of the night, I steeled myself to be the author of my own tale, ready to face whatever gripping horror awaited me in the shadows. But as I stood there, heart racing and breath coming shallow, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The silence in my room felt thick and oppressive, pressing down on me like the weight of a falling darkness that was all too familiar. I glanced around, my eyes darting to the corners where shadows loomed, waiting for the right moment to strike. The candle still flickered softly in the aftermath, but as I turned to grab it, the flame dimmed, almost as if acknowledging something sinister lurking just outside of sight. A chill crept down my spine, and I felt the air grow heavy with anticipation, like the calm before a storm. What next? I couldn't shake the dread that filled the space around me. The journal lay open, but the pages were blank, as if mocking me. In that silence, I sensed the shadows lurking just beyond the threshold of my vision, whispering threats that twisted like knives in my gut. Then came the sound. A soft scratching noise, delicate yet ominous, began to permeate the quiet air. It echoed through the room, seeming to come from all around, wrapping its way around corners and pooling in the air, tightening my chest. I followed the sound, instinct guiding me toward it, though every part of me screamed to run. It led me to the window where dark tendrils seemed to snake their way through the cracks. I bent closer, chest tightening as I tried to peer into the night. Outside, the world seemed untouched, a false facade draped in moonlight, but I felt the darkness reaching out to me, calling my name in a whisper that froze my blood. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the door, jolting me upright. I turned sharply, instinctively clutching the candle against my chest. But fear crawled deeper into my mind, each breath feeling heavier than the last. Had I locked it? Had something or someone gotten in? Gathering what courage I had left, I crept toward the door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The knocking continued, rhythmic and relentless, sending echoes down the hallway. It was a steady pulse, like a heartbeat, taunting me with the promise of discovery or doom. Who was on the other side? As I reached for the knob, an icy shiver curled through me. Despite the darkness creeping ever closer, I felt an awful pull, a sense of purpose driving me forward. I twisted the handle slowly, the creak of the door in the silence almost deafening, as if every sound had amplified against the eerie expectation. Moments crawled by, and I finally swung the door open. My breath caught in my throat. Nothing. Only emptiness greeted me. The hallway lay stretched out before me, dark and foreboding, but still eerily quiet. Every instinct told me to step back, to slam the door and hide beneath the covers, but something wouldn't let me. Something kept me rooted to the spot, as if a force was pushing me ahead. I stepped out, the floorboards creaking loudly underfoot. The shadows seemed to dance along the walls, shifting as if they were alive, hungry. I leaned into the darkness ahead, straining to hear anything beyond the whispering silence. But then the air thickened, holding its breath, and I felt like I was being pulled into an unseen gravity well. Just as I was about to retreat, I heard it again, a soft giggle, sweet yet laced with malice. It echoed from somewhere deep within the darkness of the hallway. I spun around, searching for the source, panic slowly creeping back in. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking, but I already knew. The shadows formed shapes, vague impressions of figures sliding just out of reach. They were teasing, playing with my fear, flitting into the dark like children in a game, and I felt the urge to chase after them despite every warning bell ringing in my head. I took a step forward, compelled. There was something familiar about the laughter, something that felt wrong. I reached out, fingers tingling as I touched the wall, feeling its cool surface beneath my palm. It felt like a lifeline, anchoring me as I pressed deeper into the darkness. Suddenly, the air froze again, and the laughter stopped. I felt my breath hitch in my throat as a chilling wind rushed past, carrying with it murmurs of the past. The whispers melded into a single voice, low and guttural. "Don't you want to play?" A shiver ran through me, electric and primal. Every hair on my body stood on end. The shadows surged forward, billowing as they formed into vague shapes. Faces twisted in anger, agony, and confusion, all staring back at me. The journal had conjured them, feeding on my own memories and fears, giving life to their unrest. Then the lights flickered, illuminating the hallway briefly, and in that flash, I saw their faces more clearly. They were the faces of people I'd known, friends and family. Each one wore a mask of pain and sorrow, their mouths moving but emitting no sound. I took a step back, horror welling up inside me as the realization crashed upon me. Had I brought them here? No! Stop! I shouted, feeling the candle's flame flicker dangerously close to extinguishing. But no sound came from their lips, only the echo of my own words hanging heavily in the air. As the shadows danced, I grasped for the journal again, using its presence as my anchor. The light of the candle grew faint as I felt the darkness wrap around me like chains, pulling tightly. I could barely make out the words forming on the pages once more, swirling in the ink. "You will become one of us." Panic surged, fighting against the enveloping darkness, threatening to engulf me completely. "You're not real," I yelled back, desperately waving the candle like a sword, trying to illuminate the space around me. As if in response, the shadows shifted, pushing back against my small flame. The laughter started again, but now sounded deeper, more sinister, a cacophony of distorted childlike glee. It resonated in my bones, sending shockwaves of terror coursing through me as I felt their presence tightening around my throat. I was trapped in my own nightmare, and I couldn't wake up. I tore my gaze from the faces, forcing myself to look down at the journal. It had become a lifeline, a tether connecting me to my reality. Realizing what I had to do, I bent down, clutching the pen tightly, feeling urgency thrum through my veins. I began writing furiously, pouring out my truths onto the page, weaving tales of hope against the tide of despair. The shadows shrieked, drowning out my words, but I wouldn't stop. I wrote about the night sky, filled with stars and laughter shared with friends around a campfire. I wrote about joy, love, and everything that made life beautiful. The shadows recoiled as the warmth of my memories filled the air. The candle flickered back to life, pushing the darkness away inch by inch. The faces contorted in anger, the whispers now turning to cries, a collective voice pleading with me to stop. I was pushing against them with every mark I created, reclaiming my power. "You can't have me," I declared, but the room shook as they fought back, rushing toward me like a flood. They swarmed, desperate to reclaim their hold, but I stood my ground, my strength fueled by the memories I exchanged for their darkness. As the last words left my pen, a blinding light erupted from the journal. The room dissolved into chaos, shadows roaring in fury, but I remained suspended in that light, free from their grip. The faces vanished into screams, and with one final surge, the candle flared brightly, engulfing the darkness until nothing remained, only the soft glow illuminating the empty space. Gasping for breath, I fell backward onto the floor, shaken but alive. The spine-chilling whispers faded, leaving an echo of silence behind. I lay there dazed, the journal cradled in my hands. But I knew this silence might not last long. Slowly, I pushed myself up, feeling the weight lifting as the remnants of fear lingered, curling in the corners like fading smoke. The moonlight filtered through the window, revealing my room, once again silent and still, but now different, as if it bore the scars of my battle. Yet a nagging feeling crawled back into my mind, a new awareness of the unfinished business lingering just beyond the edges of reality. I could feel the shadows still breathing, waiting for their chance to return. The battle wasn't over, I realized. As I collected myself, I noticed something shift in the corner of my eye. A flicker, just a glimpse at the fringes of the darkness beckoning me. As I turned, dread swept over me like a wave. What if I had merely torn a hole in the veil, and what I believed was victory had merely opened the door to something even more terrifying lurking just on the other side? I had to prepare myself again. I had to find a way to stay one step ahead of the darkness, because I knew, deep down, that the shadows were not done with me. They were watching, waiting, preparing for the moment when I would slip again, and in that moment they would strike. So, I took a breath, steadying myself. I opened the journal again as I felt the air shift, uneasy but familiar. My heart thrummed with the resolve to face whatever haunted me. I would be ready, and I would fight. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming my life from the literal grasp of shadows that wanted nothing more than to extinguish my light. I would write, I would remember, and I would not let darkness take me again. But as I sat there, the candle flickered softly, casting long, eerie shadows across the walls, which seemed almost to pulse with a life of their own. The room felt alive, vibrating with the tendrils of a past I thought I had escaped. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart, but the silence was heavy, almost suffocating. I could still feel the edges of the fear, coiling at the back of my mind, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the minutes ticked by, I felt an unsettling sensation in my stomach, like something was shifting in the atmosphere. It was then that I saw it, a faint movement at the far end of the room, a shadow, darker than the rest, creeping along the wall as if it had a mind of its own. My breath quickened, and I squinted, trying to determine whether my eyes were playing tricks on me. But there it was, curling around the furniture, slinking closer, like a predator stalking its prey. I grabbed the journal, clutching it tight, the pen poised for any sign of danger. My heart pounded in my chest as the shadow began to take shape, morphing into a figure. It flickered and twisted, its edges blurry and indistinct. I could feel its presence pressing against my skin, cold and unsettling. "Show yourself," I whispered, my voice steadier than I felt. But the shadow only writhed, refusing to emerge fully from the darkness. It hung there, watching me, and in those moments, I felt the weight of its gaze like icy fingers tracing my spine. I could sense a hunger in it, a craving for something it was desperately trying to obtain. Then, without warning, it lunged at me, engulfing my vision in a rush of black. I stumbled backward, my legs knocking against the journal, sending it skidding across the floor. I fought against the enveloping darkness, but it seeped into every crevice of my mind, clawing for my memories, hungry for my fears. Heart racing, I felt the shadows entwining the edges of my consciousness. They whispered my name, lingering, echoing in an unnerving crescendo. I pressed my hands against my ears, but the sound only grew louder, a cacophony of regret and despair. "You can't!" I screamed, the words coming louder than the whispers. pushing back against the darkness. Just as abruptly as it had surged forward, the shadow retreated, swirling away, leaving me gasping for breath. It settled in the corners of the room, still lurking, biding its time. What did it want from me? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. As I reached for the journal again, I noticed an odd disturbance in the air, like a ripple passing through it. The shadows around the room elongated, stretching ominously, and suddenly the room felt much larger, cavernous, as if it was swallowing me whole. I began writing again, desperate to reclaim my focus. The pen glided across the paper, desperately documenting my fears and thoughts, memories I had hoped to hold on to and shield from the dark. But every time I put the pen down, I looked up, and the shadows seemed closer. They flickered in and out of the corners of my vision, like shapes trying to form, figures whispering secrets I dared not hear. Then, the whispers turned into voices. I froze, afraid to move or breathe. They started as a mere murmur, a soft rustle like dry leaves in the wind, evolving into clear, distinct words. It was a chilling melody, sweet and seductive, beckoning me closer. "Come play with us," they sang. "We will keep you safe." Every instinct told me to run, but I felt a pull, as if those words wrapped around my mind like vines, squeezing tighter with every breath. "Stay with us," they urged. "You'll never be alone again." As they spoke, I caught glimpses of figures shifting just beyond the threshold of my awareness. Young faces, their eyes wide and hollow, grinned knowingly. The shadows contorted into what might have been children at play. Only in this twisted game, there were no rules, just chaos and despair. I shook my head violently, trying to clear the fog that descended over my thoughts. This was not a game. This was a trap. I felt the pull of nostalgia tugging at my mind. Memories spiraling out of control. The laughter of friends, the warmth of home, all tainted by an insidious darkness. The figures in the shadows seemed to sense my fear, and their grins widened, revealing teeth too sharp, glinting with malevolence. "We want you to join us," one voice chirped cheerfully. "You can have so much fun here, forever and ever." The air grew thick with the promise of companionship, yet it felt like a venomous lure, each syllable dripping with malice. I clenched my fists, fighting against their pull. There was a power in the writing, my lifeline, and I pressed on, scribbling violently, determined to lay down my truth against the onslaught of whispers. The light of my candle flared, brightening the room, illuminating the figures even as they threatened to engulf me. With every word I wrote, the laughter dimmed, but the shadows pushed back harder, pressing closer, their laughter growing sinister as they churned darker amidst the light. "Don't resist," they hissed, their voices a chorus of pressure wrapping around me, squeezing the air from my lungs. "You can't fight us. We are part of you." At that, something in my mind snapped. I slammed the journal shut, the sound echoing in the stillness, and I screamed, an unrestrained cry that ripped through the air like shattered glass. I wouldn't be their plaything, their vessel. I ripped at the shadows that hovered, stepping closer to the dim light of the candle. Time felt distorted, the shadows converging, and in the suffocating darkness, I saw the faintest glimmer. Memories flashed before my eyes, my childhood laughter, summer days spent with friends, family gatherings filled with warmth. Each one felt like a flare against the abyss, a fight for light in the cavernous dark. The figures recoiled slightly, shadows shifting uneasily as I unleashed the strength of those memories. "You won't take them from me?" I bellowed, feeling an innate power surge within me. With each vivid recollection, I felt as if I was wielding a weapon against the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, a whirling frost spreading through the room. I could see my breath misting in the air. The shadows became frantic, swirling and screaming, their forms warping with rage. My memories glimmered brighter against their dark fury, pushing back the shadows like a wave crashing against a rocky shore. But just as I thought I had the upper hand, I felt a chilling breeze wash over me, slicing through my defenses. "You will come back to us," a voice boomed, deep and mocking. The shadows recoiled, the depth of their hunger surging back, threatening to snatch away the light of my memories. I could feel my heart pounding, fear swelling in my chest. I was being dragged back into the depths, the shadows wrapping tighter around my mind, threatening to reclaim what I had fought so hard to protect. Remember, the voice echoed, deeper now, reverberating through the very fiber of my being. You can't escape your destiny. The ground beneath me trembled, and I felt reality pulse and fade. The edges of my world blurred, colors bleeding into one another. Shadows danced maniacally, laughing in victory, unlocking the door to realms I could barely comprehend. I had become a part of their narrative, and they wanted me to submit, to become one with their darkness. They whispered insidious truths, memories tinged with regret, echoing fears long buried. You are alone, and you will always be, they taunted. In that moment, doubt crept in, gnawing at the edges of my courage. I was losing myself in their chaos. Thinking quickly, I reached for the journal again, feeling its reassuring weight beneath my palm. I opened it and began to write frantically, pouring my very soul onto the pages. I wrote about my fears, my pain, my victorious moments. I trapped my thoughts in ink, reaching back to the light that had once warmed me, a damning light that, despite the darkness, still shimmered in my heart. The shadows recoiled, and the temperature of the air shifted once more. I could feel the warmth of my candle cutting through the chill, awakening a small fire within me. With every word, I sensed the shadows shrinking away, their whispers turning into shrill cries of anger and despair. Their forms faltered, the laughter becoming a cacophony of shrieks that echoed throughout the space. But I pressed forward, unrelenting. I would not be another victim of their game. I would reclaim my narrative, rewrite my fate with every letter I penned. No more, I declared, my voice echoing with determination, drowning out their whispers. My memories solidified into armor, protecting me from their encroachment. But even as I felt empowered, I knew deep down that the shadows were not truly gone. They were patient, lying in wait, ready for another opportunity to seize control. The memory of their hollow laughter hung ominously in the air, a reminder that the darkness would always linger just outside my vision. Ready for the moment I let my guard down. What if this was just an interlude before the real battle? The thought crept into my mind, sending chills racing down my spine, but I couldn't afford to falter. I looked around the room, determined to bolster my defenses. Bookshelves lined with stories of triumph and terror, trinkets filled with memories of joy, each one a beacon of light amidst the dark. I will learn, I whispered, vowing to arm myself with knowledge, to understand the shadows that haunted me. Because though they stole my breath and turned my fears into flesh, I could fight back. I would not let darkness write my story. I would become more than a vessel. I would become the author of my own fate. Resolutely, I picked up the candle, its flame of vibrant determination against the oppressive darkness. I would face whatever came next, even if it meant unearthing the darkest corners of my own mind. With each moment that passed, I prepared myself for the inevitable return of the shadows, armed with resilience and the light of my truth. The game was only just beginning. As I steadied myself, gripping the candle tighter, I felt a change in the atmosphere. The air thickened, twisting with a tension that prickled my skin. A low hum started to resonate, vibrating through the floor and into my bones. It was a sound I hadn't heard before, like a dark symphony played just beneath the surface of reality, and it sent waves of unease rippling through me. I glanced around, searching for the source of the noise, but found only shadows creeping along the corners of my vision. They seemed to pulse with my heartbeat, synchronized to the rhythm of my rising anxiety. The familiar shapes I had fought against now felt more sinister, more alive, and I could almost convince myself they were aware of my every move. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted, the warmth of my candle flickering as the wind rushed in, creating a swirling draft that sent the pages of the journal fluttering. I watched in horror as they turned, words on the page morphing and bending into twisted shapes and letters. Sentences that had once burned with my hopes now darkened, transforming into fears I had buried long ago. "You can't hide from us," the shadows seemed to whisper, their voices merging into a chilling chorus. I could feel their presence gaining strength, a collective weight pressing down on me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I wanted to scream, but the sound felt lodged in my throat, suffocated by the overwhelming sense of dread. I turned to the journal again, desperate to write something, anything to combat the wave of darkness closing in around me. But the words mocked me, swirling in a jumbled mess that refused to form coherent thoughts. I was paralyzed, trapped between despair and the looming threat of the shadows. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the ominous silence, making me jump. My heart raced as I looked toward the source, my breath hitching in my throat. It came from the adjacent room, a heavy thud that reverberated through the walls, followed by the unmistakable creaking of something dragging across the floor. Panic surged through my veins. I had to confront whatever this was. Slowly, I stepped toward the darkness, the candlelight barely illuminating the path in front of me. My footsteps echoed softly, a single heartbeat against the steady pulse of dread. The shadows writhed along the edges of my vision, twisting like anguished spirits begging for release. Were they warning me? With each step, I felt the walls close in around me, suffocating and claustrophobic as the air turned thick and stale. The doorway loomed ahead, a gaping maw engulfed in darkness. I hesitated, the icy chill of dread creeping up my spine as the whispers grew louder. Now a haunting sing-song chant. Come play with us." Summoning every ounce of courage, I took a deep breath. I pushed the door wide open, only to be greeted by a scene that made my stomach churn. The room beyond was dim, lit by a flickering light bulb overhead that swung gently from an unseen force. Toys lay scattered on the ground, old dolls with cracked faces and hollow eyes, and stuffed animals staring blankly, their fur matted and worn. A sense of wrongness settled over everything, thick and suffocating. Then I noticed the corner of the room, the source of the noise. A chair rocked back and forth by itself, as if someone had just stood up. I stepped closer, curiosity mingling with trepidation, determined to uncover the truth of what was happening here. Was something waiting for me, watching from the shadows? As I approached, the temperature dropped even more, and I felt a shiver race through me. The chair stopped moving, and silence enveloped the space. In that stillness, something shimmering caught my eye on the floor beside the chair. I knelt down, reaching for the object, my fingers trembling with anticipation. It was a small, tarnished locket, cold and heavy in my palm. I opened the locket carefully, my breath hitching as I saw the picture inside. It was a faded photograph of a little girl smiling brightly, her eyes sparkling with life. But there was something else, something unsettling about her expression, a hint of knowing that sent chills down my spine. It felt wrong, like the smile held a dark secret just beneath the surface. As I studied the locket, a whisper floated through the air, soft and sinister. "She's waiting for you." The voice slithered around me, filling the space with a creeping sense of dread. I whipped my head around, searching for the source, but I was alone. At least I believed I was. I felt a prickling at the back of my neck, a sensation that I was being watched. The hairs on my arms stood on end as I turned slowly, the locket clutched tightly in my fist. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but a part of me, curiosity, or perhaps foolishness, drew me deeper into the heart of the darkness. Suddenly, the air turned electric, crackling with energy, and I saw it. A figure emerging from the shadows. It was the girl from the photograph, her once blissful smile replaced by a twisted grin. She stepped forward, and with each movement, the shadows surrounded her, clinging like a second skin, animating her every step. "Why did you leave us?" she asked, her voice echoing as if 1,000 whispers joined in. "We've been waiting for you." I stumbled backward, heart racing, I didn't leave you. My words faltered as she stretched out her hands, the shadows reaching for me, curling around my ankles, pulling me deeper into the darkness behind her. You forgot us, she hissed, her eyes narrowing as the shadows writhed hungrily. We won't let you forget again. Panic surged through me, and I fought against the grip of the shadows, desperate to break free. I remembered the warmth of my candle, the light cutting through the oppressive dark, and with a sudden spark of determination, I ignited it with fresh resolve. I thrust the candle toward her, illuminating her twisted face with its golden glow. For a moment, the shadows faltered, and her expression flickered between anger and terror. No, she cried, and the shadows recoiled, dragging her back, but she fought against them with all her might. You can't hide in the light, she screeched, her voice warping into something unrecognizable. You belong with us, forever. The room began to shake, the floors trembling as if the house itself protested against the darkness gathering strength. I could feel the pull, an irresistible force luring me into the depths of despair that threatened to consume me completely. But I stood firm, channeling every memory that sparked joy deep within me. I focused on the warmth of sunlight, the laughter that once filled my life, and the faces of those I had loved. I spoke their names, and with each one, I felt the shadows push back farther, the girl's grip loosening as she struggled against the light's power. We will never be apart again, she shrieked, the shadows swirling violently around her, forming a tempest of blackness that lashed out at me. With a primal scream, I lunged toward the darkness, still clutching the candle. You are not my past. You've taken enough, I shouted, and with that, I hurled the locket away, watching as it spun and landed at the feet of the shadowy form, crackling with energy. In an explosive burst of light, shadows exploded outward, releasing a torrential storm of whispers that screamed and shrieked, echoing around me like a banshee choir. I felt the pull of the shadows become chaotic, tearing away from me as the light rose higher. No, you can't, the girl cried, her twisted smile fading into a look of panic. The shadows around her convulsed, tearing at her limbs as she fought to hold on. But the light was too powerful. I watched in a mix of horror and triumph as she began to dissolve, the shadows vanishing like smoke before the candle's flame. The room fell silent, the air heavy with acrid smoke. I stood amidst the remnants of darkness, panting, my heart racing with adrenaline. A dreadful stillness surrounded me, and for the first time, I felt truly alone. But that sense of isolation was fleeting as a sense of dread crept back in. The shadows were gone for now, but I knew they wouldn't remain absent forever. What I had seen, what I had fought, would find a way to return because shadows had a way of lingering, of rooting themselves deep within our fears and desires. Now, armed with the knowledge that I could battle them, I began to realize I would have to confront this darkness again. No matter how deep it hid, I couldn't escape it. The shadows were part of my own story, entwined in the very fabric of my existence. With renewed determination, I surveyed the remnants of the room, searching for clues, anything that could help me understand. There was unfinished business, and I would navigate through the chaos once more. I had to study the patterns, dig deeper into the memories that haunted the inches of my soul, and unlock whatever twisted doorways still lay open. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something glittering on the floor. It was the locket, half covered in ashes, the girl's photograph still peering out, forever smiling despite the darkness surrounding her. Gripping the candle tightly, I took it in my hand, lingering on the weight of hope it held. This battle wasn't over. I had learned to fight, and I would not give in. I knew, deep down, the war against the shadows paled in comparison to the strength I now held, ready to rise against the void. And as I stepped back into the hallway, the shadows writhing at the corners, I whispered, I will be ready for you. As I moved deeper into the hallway, shadows clawed at my ankles, lingering like phantoms searching for a way back into my mind. The sense of foreboding hung in the air, thick and suffocating, causing my heart to race with both fear and adrenaline. I could feel their presence behind me, whispering insidiously, promising more torment if I turned my back. Each step I took resonated in the stillness, the wooden floor creaking under the weight of my uncertainty. I reached the end of the hallway, where the light flickered sporadically, casting bizarre shapes against the walls, twisting and warping in the dimness. Suddenly, the sound of laughter echoed from somewhere deep within the shadows, a chilling sound that sent chills down my spine. It was high-pitched and childlike, yet laced with a darkness that hinted at something more sinister just beneath the surface. I hesitated, my breath caught in my throat, but curiosity propelled me forward. I peered into a nearby room, knowing I had to confront whatever awaited me. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit nursery, full of toys and forgotten relics of innocence. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, and a stale scent filled my nostrils, a mixture of decay and something sweetly cloying. In the center of the room sat a crib, its slats painted a once vibrant white, now peeling and faded. I approached it cautiously, drawn by an unseen force, that laughter still echoing in my mind. As I neared, I realized something was inside the crib, a small bundle wrapped tightly, too still, too silent. I reached out a shaking hand, my heart pounding like a hammer in my chest. What if it was another trap? Maybe this was a trick to lure me closer, to ensnare me once again in the shadows. But a primal instinct urged me forward. Just as my fingers brushed the edge of the blanket, the laughter morphed into cries, sharp, piercing wails that echoed off the walls. I recoiled, my pulse racing with panic, but my curiosity clawed at me, forcing me to look closer. With a deep breath, I pulled back the blanket, my skin prickling with dread. Inside was a porcelain doll, its face cracked and weathered, porcelain skin marred by dark streaks that resembled tears. Its eyes were wide and glassy, staring directly into my soul, devoid of life, yet somehow bearing witness to everything. As I stared, their gaze seemed to shift, an unsettling awareness flickering within. "Play with us," the doll whispered, its voice a hollow echo that reverberated within my mind. I stumbled back, heart racing as the room spun around me. The shadows coiled tighter, crowding the doorway, filling the space with an oppressive darkness that felt almost alive. "Join us," it chanted, the voice of the doll merging with the sinister laughter that still hung in the air, creating a cacophony of confusion. I shook my head violently, trying to dispel the grip of their words. Desperately, I turned to leave the room, but the shadows blocked my path, swirling ominously. I felt the bitterness of fear rise in my throat, choking me as the shadows grew nearer, stretching out like greedy fingers reaching for my very essence. Backing away, I caught sight of a large mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. In its reflection, I could see the room behind me, distorted and wrong, as if reality had cracked open just enough to reveal the chaos inside. The once pastel colors of the nursery deepened into grotesque shades of gray, and for a brief moment, I saw hands reaching out from within the mirror, phantoms of children begging for freedom. Panic surged as I turned to the door, determined to escape, yet the shadows lunged forward, their edges darkening the room. The doll's laughter turned into a triumphant cackle, an eerie sound that filled my head with horror. "You can't run from the game," it shouted, and I felt the shadows embrace me, pulling me back toward the crib. "Play with us?" In that instant, I felt like I was losing myself again, but deep within, a flicker of rage ignited. I wouldn't allow them to take me. Not again. With a cry born from exhilarating terror, I hurled the porcelain doll across the room. It crashed against the wall, shattering into pieces, and as it fell, the darkness convulsed violently, screeching in agony. I made a break for the door, pushing past the swirling shadows that writhed and twisted, howling in despair. Each frantic step felt like running through thick molasses, the oppressive fear pulling me down, but I forced myself forward. The laughter morphed into cries, angry and chaotic, as I reached the doorway, barely escaping their grasp. As I burst into the hallway, the The shadows shrieked like banshees trapped in a whirlwind, echoing through every corner of the house. I was free, but the sense of victory was fleeting. Boldness faded, replaced with stark fear as I realized they wouldn't be done with me so easily. Determined not to succumb again, I pressed on, searching for a way out, feeling their whispers tickle the back of my neck. Each footfall ignited the air around me, and with every turn, the house shifted. Hallways twisted, doorways blurred, and the layout felt malleable, as though the house itself was a living entity, hungry for confusion and despair. In my frantic escape, I dropped the candle, its light flickering against the encroaching dark. I turned and snatched it up, feeling the warmth seep into my hands, offering me courage even as shadows danced around me. The light revealed an expanse of walls, but beyond, I sensed movement, forms shifting just out of sight. I hesitated, heart pounding louder than the thunderous whispers that crescendoed around me. A door that hadn't been there before appeared, slightly ajar, exuding a strange glow that felt welcoming yet treacherous. It was a gamble, a door to safety or a further descent into darkness. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I was cold and weary from the shadow's relentless grip. Taking a deep breath, I stepped through the doorway, sights fixed on whatever lay ahead. The illumination brightened as I entered, revealing an expansive room filled with mirrors of all shapes and sizes. The walls sparkled like stars, yet the air felt heavy with something sinister lurking beneath the surface. "Welcome," a voice echoed, melodic yet dripping with malice. I felt the shadows of my back pulse, creeping closer, glowing in the reflections around me. I was trapped, and in that moment, each mirror reflected countless versions of myself, some grinning wickedly, others crying out in torment. They seemed to beckon me forward, like moths drawn to a flame. "Join us," they whispered, and my breath caught in my chest. "Choose one of us. Choose your fate." As I stared into the countless faces staring back at me, I realized that they reflected not only my fears but also the potential for something more: freedom, despair, strength, and surrender. In each reflection, I could see moments of my life, and I felt the pull towards those lost memories. Visions of love, pain, joy, and regret swirled dangerously, each pulling at my heartstrings, adding layers to the web that trapped me. "What will you choose?" the voice echoed again, now surrounding me, almost tangible. The reflections morphed, each one becoming more grotesque and twisted, their smiles growing wider as they reached towards me. To resist was to fight against everything I had ever been. But what would happen if I let go? Impulsively, I moved toward the nearest mirror, entranced. This version showed me as the girl I used to be, filled with laughter and hope. I smirked back at her, feeling a rush of nostalgia wash over me. But then she distorted, her eyes growing hollow, the smile fading into an eerie void. The shadows lunged forward, trying to seep into the reflection. "We'll claim you as our own," the echoes hissed, and I stumbled back, realizing the terror of allowing even a moment of weakness. I shook my head violently, drawing on every ounce of strength. My existence wasn't defined by shadows or echoes of the past. I was more than my fears. "I am not afraid," I shouted, my voice cutting through the oppressive atmosphere. The mirrors shimmered in response, some cracking under the pressure of my words, shattering into shards that fell away, revealing the darkness behind them. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the air grew frigid as the shadows recoiled momentarily, screeching in protest. But I knew they wouldn't give up easily. Something dark and primal surged from the depths of the mirrors, seeking to reclaim its prey. Their anger was palpable, and I felt the weight of their despair pressing against me with every heartbeat. "Fight back," a voice rang from somewhere within me, another essence cheering on my resolute stand. Resolving to confront my fears, I spun to face the murky darkness that boiled around the room, expanding with malicious intent. With a surge of courage, I focused on a single, fragile memory, the warmth of my mother's arms around me. I reached deep into that well of comfort, allowing it to fill me up until my heart pulsed with radiant light. "You don't own me," I declared, feeling that heart swell with a fierce determination. Light erupted from me, surging in waves, pushing back the encroaching darkness, illuminating the mirrors around me. The shadows writhed, twisting away from the brilliance, hissing as the light cracked their forms and melted them back into nothingness. They fought against it, but the radiant glow within me grew stronger, stronger than the darkness itself. "Let me go!" I screamed, throwing my arms wide, sending the light cascading through the room, suffocating the shadows, illuminating their twisted forms as they shrieked in despair, contracting into the corners of the room, fighting a losing battle. In one final push, I thrust my hands forward, unleashing the last of the light, and it exploded against the mirrors, shattering them into 1,000 glittering pieces. The echoes of my fears shattered alongside them, the murky reflections collapsing, dragging the shadows into the depths of their own destruction. In the lingering silence that followed, I felt a strange sense of release, a deep, rejuvenating breath filling my lungs as the oppressive shadows ceased their assault. I stood alone, surrounded by fragments of my past, no longer encumbered by them. Those shadows would exist. I felt a new strength unfurling within me, a flicker of resolve against whatever darkness awaited. The fight was far from over, but I had gained a vital weapon, my memories, my light. I turned away from the ruins of the mirrors, determined to forge ahead, prepared to face the remainder of my journey. Whatever awaited me, I swore I would confront it head-on, no longer afraid but empowered by the knowledge of my own strength. As I stepped into the unknown, shadows still lingered, but I felt ready. I was more than a vessel. I was the author of my own story, and I would write my fate with the vibrant ink of courage and hope. I was more than a vessel. I was the author of my own story, and I would write my fate with the vibrant ink of courage and hope. With newfound determination, I ventured further into the hallway, the light from the shattered mirrors guiding my path. Shadows receded slightly, as if they were still reeling from my defiance. Yet a darkness loomed ahead, thickening how I felt. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled as I turned another corner. Then I saw it, an old attic door, ajar just enough to reveal a sliver of darkness inside. It drew me closer, like a moth to a flame. What lay inside? Each heartbeat echoed louder in the silence, the dread wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I hesitated on the threshold, remembering the past that lingered just out of reach. Had I truly escaped it, or was this merely an invitation for the shadows to reclaim what they lost? I forced my hand forward, pushing the door open wider, the rusty hinges groaning in protest. Dust danced in the weak light, swirling like spirits lost in time. As I stepped into the attic, I was hit with a wave of nostalgia mixed with an unsettling chill. Items long forgotten filled the space. Old furniture draped in white sheets, boxes piled high, and a rocking chair that swayed gently, as if someone had just left it. I scanned the room, feeling a sense of foreboding settle in my gut. A tattered old trunk caught my eye, its rusty locks speaking of secrets trapped within. Could it hold something that might help me understand the darkness that chased me? I took a step closer, my breath hitching as the air thickened around me. It was eerily silent, and the only sound was the soft creaking of the wood beneath my feet. I knelt before the trunk, the faded leather surface cracked and worn. My fingers trembled as I grasped the latch, pulling it open slowly. Inside, there were letters, yellowed with age, and photographs that had faded into mere memories. As I sifted through them, one particular letter stood out. It was addressed to me, though I couldn't recall ever seeing it before. The handwriting was elegant yet spidery, filled with an urgency that sent shivers down my spine. "You must remember, we are always with you, never let them take you again." The words pulsed with a haunting familiarity, sending my mind racing to the shadows that I had battled. Just as I was about to unravel the meaning, A gust of wind howled through the attic, slamming the door shut behind me and plunging the room into darkness. I whipped around, my heart racing anew, panic clawing at my throat. My candle flickered violently, casting eerie shapes on the walls, and I could feel the shadows creeping back in, hissing and whispering, their voices rising into a frantic cacophony. "Come play with us, join us, we miss you," they pleaded, the words curling around me like curling smoke, an intoxicating mix of sweet and sinister. My pulse quickened, adrenaline surging as I fought against their mounting influence. I gripped the letter tightly, trying to focus on the words, but their whispered promises drowned everything else out. "You belong to us," they crooned, pulling me deeper into the shadows with their seductive tone. I pressed my hands to my ears, trembling with fear. "No, I won't," I roared, forcing myself to remember the flame of defiance within me. With every ounce of my will, I poured my light into the candle, reigniting its glow. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as the brilliance illuminated every corner. Instantly, the room transformed. The once dusty attic became vibrant and alive, revealing memories forgotten but not lost. I saw glimpses of my childhood, fragments of laughter and light surrounded by negativity. In each flicker of the candlelight, I saw not just the darkness but the golden glow of hope. The faces of family and friends who had supported me through the years, their love illuminating my path. And yet, the shadows were relentless, pushing back. I could feel them clawing at my consciousness, trying to steal those precious memories before they faded. I had to act quickly before I became ensnared again. Suddenly, I recalled the photograph I had seen in the locket, the girl smiling despite the shroud of darkness. With a surge of clarity, I stepped forward, ignoring the howls of the shadows as I grabbed another photograph from the trunk. It was of that very girl, eyes sparkling with life and laughter. "You don't control me," I shouted, holding the image like a shield against the shadows. "I remember you. I remember joy." The shadows howled in anger, their forms shifting and twisting, but my light grew stronger, fueled by the memories of love and laughter. "You can't take her," I cried, as pieces of the shadows shattered against the power of remembrance. In that moment of defiance, the attic transformed, bursting free from the clutches of despair. Walls glowed with warmth, and the chilling presence began to unravel, the shadows screeching in a symphony of defeat. But even as they retreated, I felt a dark tendril scrape against my mind, whispering sweetly, a last-ditch effort to ensnare me. "You still belong to us, such a delightful game. Remember the pain?" I steeled my resolve, pressing the photograph to my chest, feeling its warmth seep into every corner of my soul. "You are not my reality, nor my fate. I am more than the pain." My voice rang through the attic, authoritative and piercing, shattering through the darkness like glass. With a swift motion, I turned toward the door, the shadows swirling and shrieking in the distance. They were losing their grip, but I knew they weren't finished. The fight against darkness was a never-ending battle, and I had proven I could withstand their pull. As I threw open the attic door, the air shifted, cold and oppressive, yet I embraced it. I took a step into the unknown, each footfall echoing against the floor as I made my way back into the heart of the house. I would confront the shadows again, and I would find a way to break their hold. No longer would I be their victim. I would hunt down every dark corner, illuminating the truth with every step I took. But as I moved further into the hallway, a feeling of dread crept back in. What if I was not the only one in the house? What if the shadows weren't merely figments of fear, but bearers of secrets, with their own stories lurking just beyond the light? At the end of the hall, I spotted a door oddly different from the others. It was old and weathered, yet somehow it called to me. I paused, heart pounding, as the shadows buzzed softly at my back, a low hum that sent chills down my spine. I knew I had to enter, to uncover whatever lay within, but a deep instinct tugged at my thoughts, a warning. Yet, the yearning for truth pushed me forward. With trembling hands, I turned the knob, and as the door creaked open, a wave of cold air rushed over me, dark and damp, swirling like a violent storm. A chilling whisper brushed against my ear. "Come find us, we'll show you." I stepped into the unknown, senses heightened, alert to the unseen presence lurking in the shadows. The door behind me swung closed with a resounding thud, sealing my fate within the darkness. No going back. Here, silence enveloped like a cloak, heavy and oppressive. The shadows flickered and twisted, shifting like smoke in a thin veil of light. I could hear the heartbeat of the house, its pulse thun, deering in my ears. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye, and I turned just in time to see a figure darting away, faintly illuminated by the wan light that stubbornly persisted in the gloom. A childlike silhouette, fleeting yet significant, disappearing deeper into the darkness. "Wait!" I shouted, instinctively chasing after it, abandoning my cautious approach. What if it was a clue? A chance to reach beyond the veil that separated joy and despair? But as I plunged deeper into the shadows, the silence grew heavier, wrapping itself around me like a suffocating fog. It wrapped tighter, whispering unintelligible words that sent ripples of unease through me. Each step brought a sense of menace, shadows melding together like tendrils, surrounding me on all sides. "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't have come," the whispers echoed, chant-like, beckoning me deeper into the abyss. I felt small and vulnerable, the walls closing in as dread pooled in my stomach, but I pressed on, the flickering light guiding my path. The child's laughter echoed again, blooming amidst the fear, urging me to follow. The atmosphere shifted, the air thick with tension as I reached a small alcove nestled in a forgotten corner. The light dimmed again, but I pushed through, my heart racing, desperate to uncover the truth that lingered just out of reach. Peeking through murky shadows, I caught a glimpse of something shimmering, a collection of trinkets atop a dusty table. Yet as I approached, the air crackled with energy, and I felt the weight of unseen eyes upon me, watching, waiting. I steeled myself, feeling the familiar chill that had become a constant companion. The child's silhouette flickered once more, hovering by the table, all giggles and frills. "Come play with us," just like before. Terror surged within me as the whispers grew frantic, echoing my worst fears. I wasn't alone in these shadows. Something wanted me here, something dark and powerful, and it knew my memories, my pain. "Where are you?" I shouted, voice trembling, desperate to quell the encroaching darkness that swallowed the edges of my reality. The child giggled again, but there was something twisted behind that innocent sound. It filled the space, ringing hollow as shadows danced on the walls, taking shape like long-forgotten thoughts clawing their way to the surface. With a gasp, I reached for the trinkets on the table, a sense of dread washing over me. Each piece seemed alive, as if they held conversations from the past, tales of both joy and sorrow intertwined. I hesitated, knowing that touching them would pull me deeper into their world, but the child's laughter echoed like a siren call. "Join us and never be alone again. We'll show you everything." In that moment, the shadows converged, and the air thickened as I took a deep breath, preparing to confront the darkness that awaited. I could feel the edges of sanity fraying, yet I pushed forward. What lay beyond this moment? What secrets awaited to be uncovered? Murmurs of comfort twisted into sinister pleas, wrapping around my heart as I reached out for a tiny silver locket resting on the table. Its surface glimmered with an otherworldly allure unlike anything I'd ever seen. As I grasped it, memories flooded in. The girl from the photograph again, laughter that melted into screaming, bright daylight fading to ink-black night. Images flashed before me, each one thicker and darker than the last, almost suffocating. "No!" I shouted, wrenching the locket away. But the shadows surged closer, hungry for my fear, eager to engulf me in a tide of despair. The sudden rush pushed me back, my feet stumbling over the uneven ground, and I realized I was now trapped in this strange realm. You cannot escape your past, nor can you escape us, the shadows hissed, their words wrapping around my throat. The child's silhouette morphed into a monstrous figure, eyes glowing with an eerie light. Join us, become one of us, and you shall never be alone. No, I will never be one of you, I gasped, raising the silver locket in front of me like a barrier. The shadows recoiled momentarily, their forms twisting erratically, retreating from the light the locket emitted. Yet they rose again, their whispers growing shrill. You know nothing of what you are. You think you have power, but we are all that you have. In that split second, I remembered the warmth of love again, the touch of hands that protected, laughter that encircled me. You don't define who I am. I will fight you. With that conviction, I felt the locket pulse with warmth, a beacon against the encroaching shadows. Energy surged through me, igniting my courage like wildfire, pushing back against the looming nightmare that sought to swallow me whole. The shadows writhed and twisted angrily, recoiling from the light as if it burned them. I could hear their screeches, shattering the silence, scraping at the edges of my sanity. As they retreated, I caught sight of the child's figure again, morphed into something grotesque. Its face twisted in a silent scream, eyes dark pools filled with malice, like a reflection of my deepest fears. Join us, it whispered, each word dripping with malcontent, slithering through the thick air. I knew then that this creature wasn't merely a figment. It was a manifestation of all the pain I had tried to escape. Panic surged within me, but I refused to falter. With the locket clutched tightly, I took a step forward into the darkened room, its walls closing in like the insides of a beast. Every heartbeat echoed louder than the last, each thump a reminder of how very alive I was, even if the shadows sought to drown that truth. I am not afraid of you, I shouted, my voice firm against the growing whispers that threatened to engulf me. I turned and faced the twisted reflection of the child, the embodiment of my anguish and lost innocence. You don't control me. My words resonated, and the locket glowed brighter, turning the once oppressive dark into a kaleidoscope of light. The shadows shrieked in response, their forms warping as the brilliance pushed against them like a physical force. I could sense them shifting, their once solid shapes dissolving into tendrils of darkness that writhed against the walls. But a sudden coldness wrapped around me, yanking my attention back to the alcove. From the very depths of the shadows emerged another figure, its form fluid and amorphous, a grotesque blend of faces and arms stretched in eternal agony. The room's temperature plummeted, and I felt ice seep into my bones. Why do you fight so hard? It rasped, the voices blending into a chilling chorus. You can't escape the truth forever. You are bound to us by the very memories you cling to. I took a shuddering breath, knowing deep down that the darkness was trying to exploit my doubts. Those are not my truth. I will not be held captive by your lies. I could feel my heart racing. The temperature dropped a few degrees more, and a wave of fear washed over me like a tide. I focused on the warmth of the locket, letting it fill me further, calling upon every piece of light still left within. I felt a pulsing rhythm, as if it were alive, and in that moment, I realized the shadows thrived on fear, but they were just echoes of my past. They couldn't hurt me unless I allowed them to. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting, I whispered, drawing strength from the light radiating from the locket. I will remember, but I will not let you consume me. Just as I spoke, a chilling laugh erupted from the swirling mass of shadows. It enveloped me, the sound echoing all around, a mocking reminder of my past mistakes and regrets. You think you can defy us? We are your shadows. We are your whispers. There is no escape. Each twisted form in the darkness seemed to pulse and pulse, an unbearable weight pressing down upon me. I felt the locket growing cold in my hands, a flicker of doubt bubbling up within. Could I truly face what I was meant to confront? Suddenly, the room dimmed, and the shadows surged forward like a wave, their hands reaching out, grasping for anything they could take. I felt an unnatural chill crawl over my skin, as if fingers from beyond were trying to latch onto me, dragging me into their icy embrace. Remember the pain? They screamed, a cacophony that filled my ears. Images bombarded my mind. Faces of loved ones twisted in sorrow, moments of betrayal, loss, and despair. Each memory threatened to shatter my resolve, pulling me down into a cycle of torment. I could feel the fight within me wavering, the locket dimming as doubt clawed at my spirit. Shadows flickered closer, and I struggled against the overwhelming sense of dread. There was something primal about their presence, an ancient fear that tapped into every wound I had ever suffered. "You're so very close to breaking, given." The voice was seductive, slithering through my resolve and wrapping tightly around my heart like a vice. But within that suffocating embrace, I summoned a memory, a bright, shining moment when laughter cut through darkness. I clung to it, drawing strength from that fleeting sense of joy. My heart thrummed with defiance. "I will not be a prisoner of your torment," I yelled, determination pouring across my words like palpable fire, pushing back against the dark. The air around me shimmered as the locket glowed once more, casting a brilliant light that shattered through the suffocating darkness. In that moment, I felt an explosion of energy surge through me, an incandescent flame igniting the very shadows that sought to overtake me. I pushed forward, launching the light outward, a brilliant wave that illuminated every corner of the room, sending shadows shrieking away in fury. The child's form bent and twisted as it dissolved into nothingness, an agonized wail echoing off the walls as the other forms melted away. But before I could breathe a sigh of relief, I sensed that not all was finished. Another wave of darkness loomed behind them, swirling like a storm ready to unleash its fury. It was larger and more powerful than I had encountered so far, an embodiment of every painful memory and regret clinging fiercely to its core. "You think you can escape?" it hissed, the very walls vibrating with its rage. "We are not your past. We are your truth. Accept it." The room shook violently, and I stumbled, trying to keep my ground as the shadows surged forward, a tempest of despair. With every ounce of strength I had left, I raised the locket high above my head, its light brightening in response to the cold dread that threatened to swallow me whole. "I create my own truth. You have no power over me." The locket blazed, spilling golden light that coalesced into a barrier around me. In that instant, I realized I wasn't just fighting for my freedom. I was fighting for every shattered piece of hope and love that remained. The shadows seethed and thrashed, their forms disintegrating against the brilliant glow, and I could feel the negative energy dissipating into the air. "You cannot hold me. I choose my path, and the light is my guide." Even as the shadows writhed and shrieked, I took a step forward, drawing closer to the heart of the darkness. I knew they would try to pull me back, to remind me of old wounds, but I pushed on, focusing on the warmth inside. "You think your memories make you strong?" The larger shadow spat, its voice a swirling mix of anger and desperation. "They only show how weak you truly are. All I have to do is show you the truth." In that moment, images flooded my mind, the darkest moments of my life, the struggles I had faced. The shadows held many faces. Each one was familiar, their pain intertwining with my own. The wounds they struck were deep, pulling memories I thought I had buried forever, fighting against me with unforgiving strength. But then I regained consciousness of the light, the warmth of connection, the moments of laughter, love, and solace. My breath quickened as I fought back. Flashes of faces of those I lost but never forgot drenched my mind with light. There was the feeling of hands grasping in solidarity against the dark. "You are just echoes," I roared, allowing the memories of love to spill forth. Truth illuminating the black voids where despair lingered. That truth twisted through every shadow attempting to bind me, causing them to scream in anguish as they frayed at the edges. Suddenly, the large shadow lunged forward, attempting to engulf me in a swirling mass of darkness. I felt its cold tendrils wrap around my chest, squeezing tighter and tighter. Pain shot through my heart, but I refused to succumb. "You have no hold over me." I pressed the locket against my heart, its light swirling violently as if in response to my call. A wave of energy exploded from me, illuminating the entire room in a brilliant flash that pushed the darkness back further and further until it felt like I'd crossed into another realm. "Light shines brightest within the dark," I declared, my voice ringing with power and resilience. "And I carry it with me." As the last shrieks of the shadow faded away, I felt sudden stillness envelop the room. The overwhelming weight of despair lifted, and in its place, a profound sense of clarity arose. I stood alone, breathless and trembling, surrounded by the remnants of battles fought and won. Light filled every corner, and where shadows once sought to trap and confuse me, a shimmering, nurturing warmth now thrived. But in that blissful moment, I knew the shadows weren't completely vanquished. They still lingered, lurking just outside the door I'd only just begun to unlock. What else waited in the shadows? What other forms would emerge when I let my guard down? As I turned, ready to move forward, a haunting whisper reached my ears, just beyond the newly lit space. "Remember, we're always with you." A shiver traced down my spine, and I hesitated. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Something darker might still be lurking, hiding just beyond the din of victory, but I knew I could no longer fear it. Determined to search for truth, I moved toward the door. Within the shadows still, there might be something waiting to be uncovered, a final truth I had yet to face. With each step I took back into the hallway, I felt that weight return a little. The sense of unease crept back in, but I clutched the locket tight against my chest. I would face whatever else awaited me, armed with the memories of those I loved, the light of resilience, and the fire of defiance. "What comes next?" I asked the stillness, knowing that whatever resided in the darkness, I would confront it, unyielding and steadfast. This house held secrets, layers of my reality wrapped in shadows, echoes of my past that intertwined with my future. I would not shy away from the truth. Instead, I would embrace it, all of it. I pushed the door open slowly, the air thickening as I stepped over the threshold into the next room. What lay ahead was still a mystery, but the journey had only just begun. The shadows whispered once more, curling around my ankles, caressing my skin like a gentle breeze. They were not the enemies I once believed they were. They hinted at forgotten stories, hidden truths yearning to be told, and I was ready to listen. As I stepped through the doorway, I felt the temperature drop a few degrees. The air thickened, pressing in on me like a heavy blanket. In the dim light, I could barely make out the contours of the room. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me, sending prickles down my spine and turning the hairs on the back of my neck on end. Shadowy figures lingered at the edges, the dark manifestations of memories I had yet to confront. I brushed a hand across the wall, feeling the cold, damp surface beneath my fingertips. My breath came faster as each step took me deeper into the unknown. The air was punctuated by soft, scuttling noises, almost like the sound of claws against wood. What was lurking just beyond my line of sight? "I will find you," I called out, my voice wavering but resolute. The darkness seemed to laugh quietly, an echo that danced around me. "Show yourself?" As if my words had summoned it, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A small shadow detached itself from the wall, darting just out of view. I followed it, heart pounding in uncertainty. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but a deeper curiosity propelled me forward. "Don't run," I whispered into the dark, hoping it could hear me. "I'm not here to harm you." The shadow hesitated, hesitating briefly before shifting its shape, becoming more defined. The outline of a small child appeared, dark hair framing a face that was almost skeletal in the dim light. It looked at me with hollow eyes, void of emotion. Yet there was something familiar, something undeniable that pulled at my heartstrings. "You shouldn't have come here," It croaked, voice barely more than a whisper, but it was loud enough to send a chill through my entire body. The sound echoed off the walls, reverberating like a ghostly warning. You can't help us? Panic surged through me. Help who? I felt my heart thumping faster now, my thoughts racing like a tempest. Hope and fear battled within me, and yet the child's gaze held me captive. You have to leave before it's too late, it urged, stepping closer. The shadows around it writhed, almost as if they were alive, reaching out, eager to reclaim the child. But I can't, I blurted, desperation creeping into my voice. I have to understand. I need to know what happened. I took a step forward, extending a hand, hoping to bridge the gap between our worlds. Suddenly, the air crackled with an almost palpable tension. The shadows writhed violently, and I could hear the whimpers of other trapped souls, each one echoing the pain that had once held me captive. Stay away from her, the child shouted, suddenly turning its back to the shadows. The dark forms surged toward me like a tidal wave, trying to sweep me away, enveloping me in their suffocating grasp. The little one stepped in front of me, arms outstretched, and a soft light flickered around it. You have to believe. They can't take you if you don't let them. The shadows recoiled slightly, as if startled by the child's brave display of light. I could see the struggle in its features, the fight it waged against the very darkness it had once been a part of. The glow enveloped the child, illuminating the space around us just enough to reveal terrifying glimpses of the shadow's true nature. Faces twisted in agony, hands clawing desperately toward freedom, trapped forever in a torment of their own making. The air thickened as their cries blended into a cacophony, an orchestrated symphony of despair that threatened to shatter my resolve. You have to get out of here, the child urged again, and I felt the urgency behind its words deep in my chest. You are stronger than them. Trust in that strength. I looked at the child, taking in its features, the resemblance stark, yet twisted by the shadows surrounding it. Why can't you leave? I asked, panic rising. The shadows clawed at me, urging me to look away, to forget, to dissolve into confusion and fear. But I held my ground, fighting the urge to turn back. I can't. They won't let me. The child's voice trembled, tears of darkness pooling in its eyes. But you can help us. We don't belong here. Just as the weight of those words struck me, I felt the shadows begin to press closer, tightening their grip. Their whispers grew louder, filled with palpable rage. They sought to drown out the child's voice, their cries coiling around my mind. Join us. You are one of us. Remember your pain. I squeezed my eyes shut against the onslaught, forcing myself to focus. No, I refuse. The locket glowed fiercely at my chest, a beacon against the swelling tide of darkness. It pulsed with a rhythm matching my heart, urging me to trust in its power. What do I do? I asked, panic-laced tears stinging my eyes. The shadowed forms writhed at the edges of my vision, each whisper a dagger to my resolve. The child stood firm, defiantly facing the encroaching shadows. You have to choose, it shouted above the din, voice shaking but resolute. Choose to break the cycle. Choose to see beyond the pain. As those words sank in, something within me shifted. I remembered the warmth of love, the connections I had forged, the triumphs that lived far beyond the despair. That was my truth, one the shadows had tried to erase. With renewed strength, I stepped toward the child, arms outstretched in defiance. I choose to fight. I will not let your darkness consume me. The shadows surged forward, a tempest of darkness with no mercy. But I pressed on, light spilling forth from my heart, driven by my memories of love and resilience. The pulse of the locket resonated in time with my cries, lighting the room with brilliance that sent the shadows screaming back. In that moment, the room exploded in flux. The child glowed brighter, and I could see the entity's essence tearing at the fabric of the shadows, forcing them away. Together, it cried, let your light guide us. We moved as one, weaving through the chaos, our connection stronger than the pulling shadows. I watched in awe as warmth began to chase away the dark, revealing faded, sorrowful faces trapped within. "We will break the hold," I declared, feeling the energy shift, the tide turning in our favor. Every ounce of pain, every memory that had sought to deflate my spirit transformed into a brilliant beam of light. The shadows screamed again in anger, their forms twisting grotesquely as they fought against the encroaching light. I could see them begin to fracture, shriveling under the brilliance we had forged together. Another step forward, and the cracks spread wider, their anguished cries filling the space. "You don't own us," I shouted, unleashing the energy from my heart, from the very depths of my memories of laughter and love. "I refuse to be your prisoner." The orb of light expanded, enveloping the child and me, pushing back against the darkness until the room was ablaze with warmth and hope. I felt the shadows claw at my resolve, but each flicker of doubt was silenced by another rush of courage. Suddenly, a towering figure emerged from the heart of the swirling chaos. A monstrous form, even darker than the shadows surrounding it. Its eyes glowed with a creeping malice, and when it spoke, the voice was cold, like death itself. "You think you can defy me? You are nothing without your pain." I took a step back, but the child pressed forward beside me. "We will not be defined by you," it screamed, the light shimmering even stronger. "Your time is over," I yelled, pouring every ounce of strength into my words as the very air vibrated with power. "We will break free, not just for ourselves, but for all those you've stolen." The darkness convulsed, furious and trembling as the brilliant light surged forward. The room shook violently, vibrational waves echoing like thunder through my very bones, exploding outward and consuming everything in its path. "No!" the shadowed figure shrieked, trying to shield itself from the oncoming brilliance. Desperation threaded through its voice, a raw panic that sent chills racing down my spine. The light swelled, a torrential wave of warmth and hope that embraced us all. With one last mighty push, I combined my will with the child, our energies merging, a final stand against the encroaching dark. Suddenly, with a blinding flash, the darkness shattered like glass. The walls trembled, and for a moment, everything hung in silence, suspended in a kaleidoscope of brilliant light and shadow. And then it collapsed. When the light faded, I stood alone in the center of the dark room, the echoes of shadows dissipating into nothingness. The small child was gone, perhaps freed, perhaps just a figment of my imagination. Yet, the warmth remained. Somewhere within me, I knew that this was not an end. It was a beginning. I could still sense the shadows lingering around me, but they felt different now, muted, as if the tension had lessened. The air felt lighter, and though the darkness whispered at the edges, it carried none of the weight it once had. I began to gather my breath again, my thoughts swirling but focused, tracing the paths ahead. There was so much more to uncover, so many memories still lost among shadows. I felt a tug of something deep within, an understanding that my journey was far from over. As I stepped forward, I caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of my eye, something shifting in the remaining dark. I froze, heart racing, and squinted into the gloom, curiosity gripping me once again. What had I done? What remnants of the shadows still lingered? Half a step closer, and the shadows seemed to ripple, shifting like smoke. I could almost decipher a shape forming amid the darkness. "Who's there?" I called out, the echo of my voice barely breaking the tense silence surrounding me. The shadows stirred again, responding to my words, swirling into a darker point. Slowly, a figure emerged, hazy and indistinct at first. My heart raced as I tried to comprehend what it was. A face began to form, surrounded by a soft, swirling mist. A face I recognized. "You've returned," the figure said, voice low and strangely comforting. It was a face I hadn't seen in ages, yet it appeared as real as ever, submerged in a mist of forgotten memories. "You," I whispered, heart pounding in disbelief. How is this possible? Each word felt like a connection, a link to a past I thought I had lost forever. The figure smiled, a gentle expression shadowed by the surrounding darkness. You are not alone anymore. As those words floated through the air, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The bonds of darkness that had tugged at my soul were loosening, unraveling piece by piece. I took a hesitant step forward, the figure's glow illuminating the edges of the shadows that once consumed me. You have the light within you. You can finish what has begun. The vision of the person before me seemed to pulse, like an unbreakable thread through time and space. Each heartbeat echoed the strength I had forged in battle, and it urged me onward. What do I do? I felt the urgency swell again, my voice rising as I tried to grasp the enormity of everything I had faced. Yet the presence stood calm, poised with knowledge etched into the very essence of its being. Face the lingering shadows, it said softly. Only then will you truly break free. I felt the weight of those words sink in deep. Keeping my resolve alive, I remembered the truths I carried forward. The love, the joy, and the undeniable strength that illuminated the path ahead. The room began to resonate with a low hum, an energy gathering around me as I faced the remaining shadows. They circled like hungry wolves, their whispers morphing into low growls that clawed at my very essence. The air thickened with tension as the shadows converged, forming shapes that writhed and pulsated, trying to overwhelm me. Come back to us. Join the darkness. They hissed, their voices echoing in a twisted mockery of reason. Each syllable dripped with malice, a chilling reminder of the fears that had haunted me for so long. I could feel their cold tendrils reaching out, clawing at the edges of my mind, trying to drag me back into the void. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stepped forward, determined to confront the phantoms that had long tormented me. I won't let you take me again, I shouted, my voice shaking but resolute. The shadows recoiled slightly at my declaration, hissing as they realized I was no longer the frightened soul they had grown accustomed to manipulating. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet trembled, a low rumble echoing like thunder in the distance. The walls seemed to breathe in and out, and the flickering light cast eerie shapes that danced across the surfaces. Every heartbeat resonated through my body, blending with the pulsing energy around me. With each step I took, images flashed before me. Faces of lost ones, memories that had faded into the corners of my mind. They emerged from the shadows, their features twisted in anguish, their mouths moving but unable to speak. Tears filled my eyes as I recognized their pain, the sorrow I had tried to bury deep within. I remember you, I said, reaching out toward a familiar figure. It was my friend who had vanished so long ago, their eyes wide with unfulfilled dreams. I'm here for you. The shadows roared in fury, howling as they clutched at my mind with icy fingers. They sought to drown out my declaration, amplifying my fears until they threatened to overwhelm my sense of self. I could feel the anxiety clawing at my heart, each heartbeat quickening as the memories swirled around me. We are the echoes of your pain, a cacophony of voices yelled, merging into one chilling howl. You cannot escape us. Suddenly, I was plunged into darkness, an endless void that swallowed me whole. I gasped, feeling suffocated as despair gripped me. But within the suffocating darkness, I felt the slightest flicker of light pulse at my core, a tiny spark linking me to the very essence of hope. I am light, I cried out into the darkness, the words spilling from my lips like an incantation. The shadows shrieked in anger, their forms shifting violently, oscillating between terrifying shapes that seemed to close in around me. Unfurling tendrils darted forward, seeking to ensnare me, but I stood anchored, drawing strength from the flickering light within. You can't win. With each affirmation, my courage swelled. I remembered those I had loved and lost, the laughter we shared, the connections that were unbreakable despite the shadows' attempts to shatter them. The warmth grew brighter, pushing back against the darkness, illuminating the edges of my reality. As the light expanded, the shadows shrieked louder, recoiling from its intensity, but they were relentless. They surged forward again, trying to coat my vision in despair, but I was ready this time. I took deep breaths, allowing the warmth of hope to course through me. "I will not lose myself," I shouted, surging forward and letting the light fill every inch of this room. The energy vibrated through me, releasing cascades of brilliant light that swept through the shadows like a tidal wave. The darkness screeched, wailing fury as the expanse glowed brighter, revealing twisted faces melting away together, imprisoned souls that had called this place home. I pressed deeper into the light, my resolve becoming a shield against their onslaught. "This is not our ending," I declared, the words bursting forth with newfound strength. I felt the warmth wrap around me, stronger and brighter, enveloping even the deepest shadows, illuminating everything it touched. In an explosive flash of light, I sensed the balance shift. The shadows began to fracture, their dark forms splintering apart, dissolving into nothing as the brilliant energy consumed them. But just as I felt the exhilarating rush of victory, another form emerged from the depths of darkness. This entity was larger, more imposing, an ominous silhouette against the backdrop of flickering light. "You think you can defeat me?" it boomed, voice echoing with the depth of 1,000 souls, filled with malice and despair. "I have witnessed the depths of your pain," I said, my voice steady despite the terror racing through me. "But pain does not have to define me. My love and strength shatter your darkness. I will stand my ground." The air trembled with the power of its presence, thick with residual fear and the tension of past struggles. It drew nearer, shadows curling around it like mist, seeking to engulf me once more. The temperature dropped again as the icy tendrils brushed against my skin, chilling me to the bone. I closed my eyes, recalling the light that had once pushed me forward. That flickering spark were the memories that illuminated my spirit, driving me to confront the entities that sought to break me. I would not falter. The essence of my truth was my shield. "You are nothing without my pain," the creature roared, its voice splitting the air, vibrating the very bones of the room. Darkness coiled around it, merging in powerful waves, attempting to drown me within despair. But even engulfed in uncertainty, I remembered the warmth of the child's light, the strength that flickered in my heart. "You don't control me," I shouted back, each word a shot of light piercing the darkest depths. The entity surged forward like a storm, shadows swirling and howling, but I stood firm, anchored by the memories of who I was and the love that had once filled my life. I let the warmth flow from my core, my breath steadying as I spread my arms wide, inviting the light to grow even brighter. "Let it go," I yelled, feeling the heat bubble up within me. "Release your hold. You cannot own what you cannot break." As I spoke, I felt an overwhelming energy envelop me, cascading like a waterfall of pure light. Waves washed over the oppressive force, unraveling its twisted form. The brightness surged forward, cutting through the darkness like a blade, fierce and unyielding. The shadows moaned and writhed, desperately trying to hold on to their last threads of control. But I pushed deeper, every ounce of light flowing through me, pooling into an explosion of brilliance that illuminated the entire room. The air crackled with raw energy as I felt the boundaries of my reality morphing, expanding, vibrating against the despair that had so long plagued me. I stood firm, awash in warmth, holding my ground against the shadowed figure that loomed before me. It lunged at me, its shadowy form stretching beyond the room, trying to engulf all I was. I squeezed my eyes shut, allowing the warmth of my truth to fill me, releasing a prayer into the depths of the void. I am not just darkness. I am light. I am love. I am the strength forged within my battles. With each proclamation, the shadows screamed louder, a cacophony of rage and anguish rising to meet me. But within that wall of sound, I saw glimpses of faces, pale and yearning, trapped within the darkness. You will not keep them. You have no power here. The light surged, fueled by my defiance, illuminating even the deepest recesses of despair. The shadows shrank back, shrieking, as the figures trapped within began to dim, striving for liberation. As the light expanded, I noticed the dark entity flicker at the edges, its form twisting and distorting, struggling to maintain coherence against the brilliance. It was fighting, but I knew it could not prevail. "This is the end of your hold over me," I shouted, thrusting my hands forward, channeling every memory, every ounce of strength into that radiant glow. The shadows screamed one last time, then began to disintegrate, unraveling into wisps of darkness that faded into the ether. I stood there, enveloped in light, heart racing, triumph coursing through my veins. The air felt lighter, the weight of fears beginning to lift. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, allowing the clarity to wash over me. Yet just as relief threatened to settle in, I felt a chill creep up my spine, a familiar darkness still lingering just beyond the edge of the room. I opened my eyes slowly, the light still shimmering around me, but something deeper remained. The shadows hadn't vanished completely. What lay ahead was still obscured, a looming sense of dread that clung to the corners of my mind, whispering that perhaps the darkest part had yet to reveal itself. What now? I wondered, heart pounding, scanning the space for any hint of movement. Just then, I saw a flicker in the corner, a shadow deeper than the rest. It seemed to pulse and swirl, beckoning me closer. I took an uncertain step forward, curiosity warring with lingering fear. "You think you've won?" A chilling voice emerged, low and filled with malice. The shadows pooled against the wall, swirling into a coherent form, darker than the void I had just vanquished. "You will never escape me," it hissed, its features forming into grotesque shapes, twisting and writhing like a broken puppet. There was no denying the menace that surrounded it, an ancient evil that filled the air with foreboding. "I will face you," I declared, but internally I trembled, the memory of its earlier power lingering in the back of my mind. "You can't keep me from my truth," the creature laughed, a sound so chilling it echoed hollowly within my chest. "You think your light can shield you forever?" it whispered, dark eyes glinting with malice as it continued to emerge from the shadows. Every movement was elegant yet predatory, a malignant fluidity that sent shivers racing through me. "You have a fire deep within, but it won't last." With a swift motion, it surged toward me, shadows extending like claws. I felt the cold rush of despair wash over me as I braced myself, but in that moment, I grabbed the locket at my chest, drawing strength from its warmth. "I will conquer this," I shouted, voice strong and defiant despite the depths of fear that gripped me. "You cannot poison my spirit." The shadows surged around me, chaotic and consuming. I faced the encroaching darkness head-on, summoning the light I had forged from love and remembrance. I was determined, willing to fight against this entity to reclaim every part of myself they had stolen. "You are only a fragment of my pain, a mere shadow of my past," I yelled into the maelstrom, pouring my essence into the warmth that surrounded me, rekindling the flicker that had not yet extinguished. The creature screamed, its voice a cacophony that merged with the wails of the shadows, trying to drown me in darkness. But I held steadfast, forming a protective barrier with every ounce of my being, fueled by resilience and undying hope. Then, with one last cry, I unleashed the full force of my spirit. Light erupted from within, cascading through the room like a storm, breaking the dawn, illuminating the darkness in one piercing blast. The shadows screamed one final time, disintegrating into a haze of dust, the darkness unraveling like threads pulled taut. The room trembled, but I stood tall and unwavering as the light eclipsed everything, filling the void with warmth where despair had once ruled. For a moment, everything felt suspended, lingering in a beautiful cosmic embrace. But in the distance, I thought I heard a faint whisper, dark and cold, barely discernible beneath the triumph. This isn't over. But I brushed it aside, heart racing as the light faded, leaving only a soft glow as the remnants of the darkness dissolved into the ether. I stood in silence, breathing in the air that felt lighter than before. What have I unleashed? I murmured, the echo of my voice feeling foreign in the now quiet room. The light still flickered faintly around me, but a heavy stillness began to settle, as if the air had thickened with unsaid words and unconfessed fears. A deep unease crept into my bones as I scanned the space, half expecting the shadows to reshape themselves, to spring back to life like phantoms emerging from a grave. The silence took on a weight of its own, pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. Every creak of the floorboards felt exaggerated, as if they were whispers warning me to leave. I couldn't shake the lingering feeling that something malevolent was still present, lurking just out of sight, biding its time. The edges of my vision danced with movement, and I turned quickly, but saw nothing. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, the result of adrenaline still racing through my veins. Yet, as I stood there alone, the weight of unseen eyes surveyed me, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Without warning, a chill swept through the room, making my breath turn frosty in the air. My heart raced. This wasn't just a lingering darkness. Some essence of it remained. I felt it as a shift in the atmosphere, a palpable dread that coiled around me like a serpent, tightening its grip. "Show yourself!" I shouted defiantly, but the sound echoed back, unreturned. The silence around me felt mocking, raising the specter of doubt within my mind. Had I truly won, or was this merely a momentary facade covering a deeper horror? As I took a cautious step forward, the ground gave way beneath my feet. A sudden crack ripped through the air, a chasm forming where I stood. I stumbled, hands flailing as I grasped for something solid to hold on to, but it was too late. I felt myself slipping, the abyss below yawning wide like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. Panic surged, and instinct kicked in. I reached out, and by some miracle, I caught the edge of the floor, hanging precariously over the darkness that twisted and roiled below me. "Not again!" I shouted as I hoisted myself up, heart pounding like a drum in my ears. I crawled back to solid ground, breathing heavily as I pushed myself to my feet. But the relief was short-lived. The shadows began to swirl again, clawing their way back to shape, grasping for me, whispering my name. "You thought you could leave?" They taunted, their voices echoing in a hushed chorus that sent chills racing down my spine. The air thickened, a cloying fog wrapping around me, suffocating and intoxicating all at once. I stumbled, disoriented, as the world twisted around me. The dim light began to flicker violently, casting strange shadows that danced along the walls, forming shapes that were all too familiar. Faces contorted in agony, reaching out with silent screams. I could almost hear the names of those I lost, and it gripped me in a vice of regret and sorrow. "What do you want from me?" I yelled, desperate and frightened. The shadows laughed, a low, throaty sound that echoed ominously. "Everything you are, everything you fear," they hissed back, their words like ice crawling over my skin. A figure emerged, taller and more sinister, its eyes glowing with cold fire. "You cannot hide from your past. We are your memories, and we will consume you." I backed away, heart racing as the shadows pressed forward. The echoes of my past began to stir, rising like a tide, threatening to drown me, each wave slamming me with emotions too heavy to bear. I saw flashes of moments, the laughter of friends long gone, the joy twisted into screams of despair. A memory surfaced, sharp and painful, threatening to overwhelm me. "No, you won't take me again," I shouted, clenching my fists, the warmth of the light flickering weakly within me. But the shadows surged forward, their fingers stretching like claws, ready to grasp and claw at my very spirit. The room began to pulse, the walls shaking as though an earthquake had struck. I stumbled back, fear gripping me tighter than any darkness. I couldn't lose myself again. I wouldn't. With every ounce of will, I fought against the encroaching fright. "Get away from me!" I screamed, the power of my voice surprising even me. The shadows recoiled, momentarily faltering, but their presence was relentless, reforming into grotesque forms that roamed just beyond the edges of my vision. They were everywhere now, a mass of dark whispers converging as a storm. "You can't fight us," they sneered as the air crackled with malice. "You are one of us." A sudden surge of fear overwhelmed me, making it difficult to breathe. I fell to my knees, clutching my head, desperately trying to block out the whispers that clawed at my sanity. I was losing ground. The shadows pressed in closer. I could almost feel the cold breath against my neck. "You think you are strong?" The deep voice reverberated around me, weaving through my thoughts. "You think you have light? We are your fears. We are your flaws. You cannot escape what is inside of you." The weight of those words struck hard, forcing me to confront my deepest insecurities. I shuddered as images flashed through my mind. Moments of failure, echoes of doubt, the faces of those who felt abandoned by me. Each memory felt like a dagger, piercing through the fragile shield I had built against the darkness. I fought back a wave of despair, trying to summon the light once more, but it flickered tenuously, as if wavering in the face of encroaching shadows. "You don't control me," I insisted, voice cracking, hand trembling as I reached deep within, desperate to find the spark that had once ignited my strength. But they were so close now, shadows threatening to close in around me, ready to snuff out whatever hope remained. I could sense the cold creeping into my bones, the weight of despair trying to drag me back into the depths of the night. Panic set in, and I knew I had to act quickly. Summoning every last shred of willpower, I drew in a deep breath and screamed into the maelstrom. "I am not afraid of you." The shadows froze, darkness swirling around me like a tempest, hesitating, if only for a moment. In that uncertainty, I saw a flicker of light shoot through the chaos, a faint reminder that within me, there was still hope. With a determination I didn't know I possessed, I lifted my chin. "You are just remnants of my fears," I declared, forcing the words through gritted teeth. "I am not bound by you." The shadows recoiled at my confidence, their forms distorting and wavering. Fear flickered in their presence. I could feel the shadows attempting to claw back, sucking in the darkness to bolster their strength, but it was too late. I was on my way to reclaiming my light. "This ends now." I pushed back against the shadows, letting out a primal scream that echoed, bouncing wildly off the walls. My voice reverberated with power, lit by the passion of my struggle, every fragment of fear igniting a determination that glowed brighter than the shadows could understand. Slowly, the shadows started to unravel, disentangling from their monstrous forms, twisting like smoke in the breeze. The dark figure, now furious, lunged forward, but I stood my ground. "You don't scare me anymore," I cried, the warmth surging to fill the void of dread they had instilled. The darkness hissed, spitting curses that filled the air with tension, but I pressed on. "You have no hold on me. I choose my path." With a final burst of energy, I drove my hands forward, channeling all that I had into a brilliant wave of light. The shadows howled in protest as the brightness engulfed them, erasing them from existence. But just as I thought I could breathe a sigh of relief, a sharp chill shot through me, almost palpable, like nails scraping against bone. A deep rumble, heavy and ominous, vibrated through the floorboards. I glanced around frantically. This was not over yet. The lingering echo of those shadows felt like the closing of a lid over a cauldron of angry spirits. I felt a pulse of dread. It was not entirely gone. It lurked, waiting, ready to resurface when the moment was right. "You think you can defeat us so easily," a voice whispered, echoing dangerously close. The ground shook again, and the walls trembled, as if an unseen force pressed against them, threatening to burst forth at any moment. "No," I breathed, fear creeping back into my heart, realizing that these shadows were more than just remnants. They were bound to the very essence of my being, and as much as I had fought, they still clawed at every crack and crevice of my spirit, ready to take hold when I least expected it. "We will return, and when we do, you will be ready," the voice promised, cold and ruthless. I stumbled back, heart racing, mind racing with panic. I had survived this clash, but there was a chilling certainty that I had awakened something darker, something that would not rest until it claimed me wholly. What do I do? My thoughts spiraled. The light around me flickered dimly, and for a moment, despair threatened to overtake me. I needed to find a way to keep it at bay, to fortify my spirit against whatever barriers I had lowered. "You have to confront them, embrace them," the familiar voice whispered from within my heart. "Transform that which haunts you into strength. Find the warmth once more, light the shadows within." I closed my eyes, gathering my breath, holding on to those words as truth resonated deep within me. I had fought too hard to fail now. They may be lurking, but I could find the path back to light. I opened my eyes slowly, determination igniting a flame deep at my core. I would not let fear dictate my life. I would not allow the shadows to have power over me any longer. I had to learn to carry light within, even among the dark. With that thought, I took a step forward into the very heart of the shadow's domain, ready to confront whatever lurked within. If I was to face them again, I would be as unyielding as the light that flickered within me. It was time to turn the tide. I stepped into the thickening shadows, heart pounding as the darkness enveloped me. The world around me twisted into a macabre landscape, a mixture of sorrow and rage woven into every shadow. The air felt charged, humming around me as if anticipating a storm. I could sense the remnants of the entity lurking just beyond the borders of my vision, a vile presence waiting for the right moment to strike. The shadows coiled and writhed as I stood my ground, the oppressive silence filled with an unsettling anticipation. My breath echoed in the vastness, and as I exhaled, the mist gathered around me, swirling like hungry wolves ready to pounce. Each heartbeat amplified the intensity of my pulse, a reminder that I was still alive amidst this unsettling nightmare. I called forth the light, summoning every flicker of warmth buried deep within me, hoping to cast it against the shadows surrounding me. But the response came not in warmth, but in a chilling laugh that echoed through the room, the sound bouncing off the walls in an eerie symphony. "You think you can defeat us with mere light," it taunted, the coldness creeping back into my veins. "You don't know the depths of your fears." From the swirling mass, figures emerged, lost souls dragging chains forged from their own despair. I recognized them. They were people I had once cared for, faces twisted in agony, their eyes pleading for release, yet trapped forever in the realm of shadows. It was a grotesque display of pain, a reflection of my own regrets spilling out to mock me. Their tortured whispers filled my ears, imploring me to turn back, to run from the remnants of my darkness. I shook my head, thrumming with determination. "No, I refuse to let you win," I yelled, the echoes of my voice ricocheting off the silent screams around me. With that declaration, the light within me flared brightly, pushing against the shadows, illuminating the darkness like a fierce sun breaking through the clouds. But the shadows retaliated, swirling violently, pulling me toward the depths of despair. The floor beneath me trembled as if awakening from a long slumber, fissures forming that threatened to swallow me whole. With each crack, I felt the weight of despair crushing down, desperate waves that crashed against my resolve. I fought against it, but the darkness was relentless, pulling at my spirit, trying to siphon away the light I had left. Suddenly, the shadows converged, forming a grotesque figure, a monstrous amalgamation of fear, despair, and the lost faces I had seen before. It lunged for me, a titanic mass threatening to engulf my very essence. "You will belong to us," it roared, a voice that echoed with both familiarity and hatred. I instinctively willed the light forward, envisioning it broadening around me, pushing back against the suffocating blackness. My heart raced as I felt the light pulse, matching the frantic rhythm of my fear. "I'm not afraid of you," I shouted, forcing the words through gritted teeth. The shadowy creature hesitated for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing its grotesque features. I seized that moment of hesitation and threw every ounce of my energy into the light, a blinding wave that surged forth, illuminating the dark creature that had tormented me for so long. The creature screeched, and dark tendrils were scorched by the brilliance, unraveling like smoke against flame. I could hear them. The shadow's cries mingled with the echoes of my past, a cacophony of anguish wreaking havoc in my mind. "You are nothing without your fears," they wailed, but their voices grew fainter, struggling against the radiant force I had become. I pressed on, intensifying the brilliance until it felt like a supernova erupting from within me. "You will not take me," I screamed, the power surging in a final stand against the darkness. The creature writhed and twisted, caught between the suffocating dark and the purging light, desperation clawing at its insides. With a final burst, the shadows shattered, fracturing into 1,000 little pieces, carried away by a luminous wind. Silence followed, a deep, penetrating stillness. The weight on my chest lifted, and I felt my heart slow, the ache of fear fading into the ether like a long-lost memory. But deep within, I sensed something sinister lingering just beyond the edges of my consciousness. I thought I had conquered the darkness, but the fleeting shadows danced in the corners of my vision, a reminder that this battle would never truly end. As daylight seeped through the cracks in the walls, illuminating the remnants of my once dark domain, I knew I would always carry pieces of that darkness within me. It would linger, lurking silently beneath the surface, waiting for a moment of weakness. Fear can be powerful, but so can light, I whispered to myself, a mantra against the encroaching chill that had yet to dissipate. Perhaps the darkness would never truly leave. It was part of me, woven into the fabric of my being. But in recognizing that, I also acknowledged the strength that lay within. Facing what haunted me was the only way forward. With that thought, I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the light swell deep inside me once more. No longer would I flee. I would stand guard over my spirit, ready to shine brightly, even if shadows were to come creeping back. In the end, I had become the keeper of my light. I stepped forward into the world beyond, knowing that my journey was just beginning, every step a testament to my resilience against the haunting whispers of the past.